I never thought my own son could betray me. But that day, as I opened the locked drawer, my hand shook. What I saw there made my heart stop. I had always trusted him. My son, the boy I held in my arms when he was born, the one I stayed up nights for when he was sick, the one I cheered for at every recital, every game, every milestone. I had trusted him completely. He always seemed responsible, kind, and honest. At least that's what I believed. But life has a way of showing you cracks you never knew existed. It started on a quiet Saturday morning. I was organizing old documents, the kind you keep tucked away in drawers because you might need them someday. As I sifted through faded receipts and bank statements, I noticed something odd, a set of statements that didn't belong to me. My heart skipped a beat as I traced the account name. It was his, my son's, and it was massive. I froze. The numbers didn't make sense. How could he have all that money? I remembered every conversation we ever had about bills, debts, dreams, college loans. Nothing hinted at this. I had trusted him to tell me if he ever needed help, or even if he was lying. And yet, here it was, undeniable and undeniable. I closed the drawer and sat on the edge of the couch, trying to steady my racing heart. Was this a mistake? Could I have misread it? But deep down, I knew I hadn't. The truth was there, staring back at me in cold black and white numbers. I could feel my trust cracking. A lump formed in my throat as I remembered all the times I had given him money for emergencies, helping him pay bills, lending him what I thought was for his real needs. Had he been hiding all along? My mind flashed back to last Christmas. He had borrowed some money, saying it was for an urgent repair on his apartment. I remembered the relief I felt when I handed it over, proud to help my son, thinking I was doing the right thing. And now that memory felt poisoned. I wondered how many times he had lied to me. How many times had I been blind to the truth? I decided to dig deeper. I couldn't stop myself. Each envelope I opened, each paper I unfolded, added weight to my heart. The bank account was real, and it was untouched by any emergencies he had claimed. It was a secret he had kept for years. My son, my own flesh and blood, had deceived me with a smile, with laughter, with, "I promise, Mom, I'm fine." Tears stung my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not yet. My mind raced. Why would he do this? Was it greed? Was it shame? Or something else entirely? I needed answers. But part of me feared them. Because sometimes the truth can hurt more than silence. I remembered sitting with him over dinner a few nights ago, listening to him complain about being broke and how stressful life was. I had given him advice, support, and even offered some financial help without hesitation. And here he was, lying through every word, hiding an entire fortune from me. Betrayal isn't always loud. It can be quiet, insidious, and worse than any argument or fight. I had to confront him. But how do you face a child who has betrayed your trust? How do you speak when your own heart is breaking in real time? I rehearsed words in my head, sentences that balanced anger, disbelief, and hope that maybe there was a logical explanation. But deep down, I knew explanations would not undo the hurt. I took a deep breath and decided to follow the paper trail. Every deposit, every transaction, every statement told a story he never shared with me. It was a story of deception, of hiding, and of lies layered upon lies. My stomach turned as I read. Some of the deposits were from work he never mentioned. Some were from gifts, loans, and unexpected inheritances he had quietly received. He had kept all of it from me. And then, the question hit me hardest. What else had he lied about? The trust we built over decades now felt fragile, like glass under pressure. I felt the walls of my heart shaking as I realized this wasn't just about money. This was about truth, integrity, and the bond between a mother and her son. Could I ever look at him the same way again? I sat there for hours, documents spread around me like a battlefield. Each piece a weapon, each number a silent accusation. The quiet house around me seemed louder than ever. I could hear my own breath, the faint ticking of the clock, and the echo of my disbelief. And in that silence, I knew that my life was about to change forever. The moment I had been dreading finally arrived. He walked in, cheerful as ever, completely unaware of the storm waiting for him. I stood clutching a statement in my hands, my voice trembling even before I spoke. "We need to talk," I said softly, yet every word was sharp enough to cut through the room. His smile faltered, and I knew immediately that he sensed something was wrong. He asked what was the matter, and all I could do was hold up the papers. "I found this," I said, my hands shaking. "All these years? You lied to me." His face went pale, eyes wide, searching mine for understanding, for forgiveness, for a way to escape what he had done. I realized then that this confrontation was not just about the money. It was about years of trust shattered, words spoken in good faith, and a bond I didn't know could be broken. He tried to explain, stumbling over words, trying to justify his secrecy, but nothing made sense. Every sentence he uttered only dug the hole deeper. I felt my anger rising, but beneath it there was something else, a deep, aching sorrow for the son I thought I knew, the man I had trusted with my heart, and the person who had hidden so much from me. The room felt smaller, suffocating as I processed everything. How could someone so close keep such a giant secret? How could the boy I raised, nurtured, and believed in be capable of this? And yet here we were, standing face to face, truth laid bare, and a mother forced to confront the unimaginable. I realized in that moment that my next step would define everything. Do I walk away, broken and bitter? Or do I fight to understand, to reclaim trust, to seek the truth fully? The choice weighed heavy on me, but one thing was clear. Nothing would ever be the same again. He sat there, fumbling with his hands, and I could see the guilt written all over his face. The silence was deafening. I wanted to scream, to demand every answer at once, but I held myself back. I needed to listen first. The weight of betrayal hung in the air like thick fog, and I realized how fragile our bond had become in a matter of minutes. I didn't want you to worry," he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I thought I could handle it all on my own." I wanted to believe him, wanted to find some reason to forgive, but my mind kept replaying every lie, every excuse, every false story he had told me over the years. How could I trust him again? I took a step closer, clutching the statements in my hand. "Handle it? You lied to me for years. Do you know what it feels like to discover your own child has been hiding this from you?" My voice cracked, tears forming but not falling. He flinched at my words, and I could see him shrinking under the weight of my hurt. He tried to explain how he felt ashamed, embarrassed, and scared I'd judge him, but every word sounded hollow. How many times had I reassured him that he could talk to me? How many nights did I stay awake worrying about him, only to find out he had been keeping a life-altering secret? The betrayal wasn't just about money. It was about every moment I thought we were honest with each other. Every story I believed, every laugh we shared. I sat down heavily on the couch, still holding the papers. My body ached, but my mind raced. I couldn't help but think back to all the times I had lent him money for small emergencies, repairs, bills, college fees, thinking I was helping. I wondered how much of that he had spent, how much he had manipulated me with half-truths. It made my chest tighten, and a mix of anger and sorrow welled up inside me. "You could have told me," I said softly, my voice trembling with a mix of grief and rage. "You could have come to me and asked for help. Why didn't you?" He looked down, unable to meet my eyes. That silence spoke louder than any explanation he could give. It was a silence full of regret, shame, and the cold realization that trust, once broken, is not easy to repair. I noticed the way his hands shook. The little things, the subtle signs of guilt, suddenly screamed the truth louder than words. And yet a small part of me still wanted to understand. I wanted to know why he felt the need to hide, why he thought secrecy was better than honesty. I knew that if I didn't ask, I'd never get closure, and without closure, the betrayal would linger, poisoning every memory we shared. "Show me everything," I demanded, holding the statements closer. I want to see all of it. Every deposit, every withdrawal, everything you've kept from me." He nodded hesitantly and led me to his study, a room I rarely entered. The air smelled faintly of coffee and paper, but now it felt heavy, oppressive, like the room itself was holding its breath in anticipation. He opened a drawer and handed me a folder thick with documents. My hands shook as I went through them, my eyes scanning lines of numbers that had been hidden from me for years. There were savings, investments, and transactions that painted a life he had kept entirely secret. The depth of it left me stunned. Each page felt like another layer of betrayal being peeled back, exposing not just money, but lies, trust broken, and a relationship tested to its limits. And then I noticed something else. Amid the legitimate transactions, there were deposits labeled in ways that confused me. Gifts from family, money from old friends, a few unexpected inheritances. He had hidden everything meticulously. My heart sank. How long had this been going on? How many times had he smiled at me, laughed with me, and quietly kept secrets behind my back? The realization was suffocating. I looked up at him, searching his eyes for any sign of remorse or explanation that could make this less painful. "Why?" I whispered almost to myself. "Why didn't you trust me enough to tell me the truth?" His gaze wavered. He opened his mouth, then closed it, as if words were insufficient. I felt a chill run through me. Sometimes silence can speak louder than confession. I realized then that this confrontation wasn't just about discovering hidden money. It was about understanding why he felt the need to lie, why he thought secrecy would protect him, and how this had slowly corroded our relationship over the years. And the hardest part? Knowing that even with explanations, nothing would immediately mend the hurt. Trust, once fractured, doesn't heal overnight. He finally spoke, voice trembling. "I didn't want you to see me as weak. I didn't want you to worry." But the words rang hollow against the backdrop of years of hidden accounts and half-truths. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but I also felt a strange, aching empathy. He had been scared, terrified even, and that fear had led him down a path of secrecy and deceit. I set the papers down and closed my eyes, trying to calm my racing thoughts. The room was quiet, except for the faint hum of the air conditioning and the soft creak of the floorboards. I could feel my own heartbeat echoing in my chest. And amidst the hurt, anger, and betrayal, there was a flicker of resolve. I knew one thing for certain. I would need to navigate this carefully, to understand the why, and to decide how, or if, we could rebuild what had been broken. But before any of that could happen, I had to face the hardest truth. My son, the boy I trusted with my life, had chosen secrecy over honesty. And now, the path forward was unclear, shrouded in questions, emotion, and the heavy weight of betrayal that I could no longer ignore. I left the study for a moment, needing air. The hallway felt unusually long, the walls closing in around me. My hands were clammy, my mind spinning with questions I wasn't ready to ask aloud yet. How could someone I raised, nurtured, and believed in hide so much from me? Each step I took echoed like a warning, reminding me that nothing would ever be the same again. He followed quietly, his presence both comforting and haunting. I could feel his gaze, heavy with guilt, yet searching mine for a flicker of understanding. It was strange, this mix of anger and empathy, wanting to shake him for lying, but also wanting to comfort the scared child I remembered from years ago. My emotions twisted in knots. I returned to the living room, papers spread out across the coffee table, and motioned for him to sit. "Show me everything," I said again, firm but softer this time. He opened his laptop, fingers trembling slightly, and pulled up statements I hadn't seen in years. Line by line, transaction by transaction, the reality of his secret life unfolded before me. My heart ached, not just for the betrayal, but for the years of trust that had been quietly corroded. I noticed little patterns, small amounts disappearing here, deposits hiding there, every move calculated. I realized he had gone to great lengths to maintain this illusion of honesty. Every lie, every story had been carefully crafted. And it hit me that deception is exhausting. I felt a strange mix of fury and pity. My son had trapped himself in a web of his own making, and now I was forced to untangle it. "I don't even know where to start," I whispered, almost to myself. He nodded, eyes downcast, clearly aware of the weight of the silence. I wondered if he understood how fragile our relationship had become. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about trust, respect, and the bond that had defined us for decades. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "I need to know why," I said, voice barely above a whisper. "Why did you hide all this? Why not come to me?" He swallowed hard, and the room felt unbearably still. The air was heavy, thick with the tension of unspoken words and the echoes of betrayal. He finally spoke, voice shaky and low. "I was scared. Scared you'd judge me. Scared you'd think less of me. I thought if I handled it myself, it wouldn't matter." His words were simple, but the weight behind them was immense. I could see the struggle etched across his face, the boy who needed his mother's approval, the man who feared losing it. But the truth didn't make it easier to forgive. My mind raced through all the moments I had unknowingly enabled him, all the times I believed his excuses, all the trust I had given freely. It felt like years of memories had been tainted, and the ache in my chest grew heavier with each passing second. I stood up and paced, gripping the edge of the couch to steady myself. "This isn't just about fear. This is about honesty. We promised each other we'd always be truthful. How could you break that promise?" He flinched at my words, a subtle twitch that betrayed the shame he carried. I could see him struggling to find answers, to explain a lifetime of choices with words too small to carry them. I forced myself to slow down, to breathe through the hurt. I realized that anger alone wouldn't fix this. I needed understanding. I needed him to understand the magnitude of his actions. And yet, part of me ached for the boy who had grown into a man capable of hiding so much. It was a paradox of love and betrayal, hope and despair, all tangled into one suffocating reality. He hesitated, then pulled out a small envelope from his pocket, shaking slightly as he handed it to me. "There are letters. Explanations I wrote but never gave you," he said. My hands trembled as I took it. The envelope felt heavy, not with paper, but with the years of secrets, fears, and unspoken truths it carried. I wondered if reading it would bring clarity or shatter me further. As I opened the first letter, I noticed the familiar handwriting, the one I had taught him as a child, the one I had loved seeing grow into his adult hand. And yet, the words inside were unfamiliar, a stranger's honesty spilling onto the page. He wrote about fears, mistakes, regret, and moments where he felt trapped. He admitted everything I had discovered today, every secret, every hidden account, every deception. Tears blurred my vision as I read. I could feel the pain he carried, the shame that had weighed him down for years. And yet it didn't erase the betrayal. I had trusted him, believed in him, and now I was left questioning every story, every conversation, every smile that had once felt so genuine. I set the letter down, hands shaking, heart racing. "Do you understand what this means for us?" I asked softly. He nodded, eyes brimming with tears, as if acknowledging the chasm that had formed between us. It was a silent recognition that trust, once broken, is not easily repaired. But it is possible, if both are willing to face the truth. And in that quiet, charged moment, I realized that our journey was just beginning. The road ahead would be filled with difficult conversations, questions that demanded answers, and emotions too heavy to carry alone. But for the first time since discovering the secret, I felt a glimmer of hope, a fragile, flickering hope that we might navigate this storm together. And maybe, just maybe, reclaim the bond that had been hidden beneath layers of deception. I stayed quiet for a long moment just watching him. The boy I knew had grown into a man full of secrets. Yet here he was, vulnerable in a way only he could be. I could see the weight of years pressing down on him, bending his shoulders, clouding his gaze. I didn't want to soften too soon. I needed to understand the full extent of the deception, but part of me ached to reach out and just hold him. He fidgeted, looking at his hands like they held the answers. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," he whispered. "I thought I was protecting you." "Protecting myself, too." I swallowed hard, feeling my chest tighten. Protecting me? Hiding an entire life of money? Protecting myself? I wanted to ask why, how, when, but words failed me. I only had a lump in my throat and a storm of emotions swirling inside. I walked over to the window, staring at the gray sky outside. The clouds were heavy, low, pressing down like the tension in the room. I remembered every time I had given him money, thinking it was for emergencies, only to discover now it had all been unnecessary. My mind raced through memories, conversations, all the moments I thought we shared honestly. They felt tainted now, but still, there was a part of me that longed to believe in him. "I need to know everything," I said finally, voice soft but steady. "Not just about the money, but why hide it all? Were there other lies? Other things you didn't tell me?" He swallowed hard, looking like a man carrying an invisible mountain. "There are a few things," he admitted. "Some things I wanted to fix before you found out. I thought I could handle it." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. My heart felt like it had been pulled in opposite directions. Anger, betrayal, sorrow, and a strange, stubborn love that refused to leave. I realized then that part of being a parent is confronting the truth, no matter how much it hurts. And this was the truth. He had lied, hidden, and deceived. And now it was all laid bare before me. He opened another folder, pulling out sheets of paper I hadn't seen yet. "I made plans," he said quietly. "I wanted to fix things before you knew. I didn't want to worry you. I thought I could protect our family." I frowned, unsure how to feel. Protecting us? Or hiding from accountability? His intentions, however well-meaning, had caused irreparable damage. I picked up one of the sheets, scanning the careful calculations, the careful planning, the hidden accounts, and secret investments. He had worked meticulously, covering tracks, creating a life separate from what I knew. I could see the fear in every careful decision, and yet I also saw selfishness. Every choice was a mixture of both. Love twisted with deception, fear tangled with greed. "Do you understand?" I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "What this has done to me?" "To us?" He nodded, tears brimming in his eyes. I could see regret etched into every line of his face. And yet, even in his sorrow, there was relief. Relief that the truth was finally out, that he no longer had to carry the secret alone. I sat down slowly, letting the weight of everything settle around me. "I don't know how we move forward from here," I admitted. "I need time and answers." He nodded, understanding the gravity of what he had done. This wasn't something that could be fixed with a simple apology or explanation. Trust would have to be rebuilt piece by piece, day by day, word by word. The room was silent except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the clock. I felt the enormity of the moment pressing down on both of us. For years, he had lived a double life, and now the consequences were ours to face together. I realized that forgiveness wouldn't be instant. Healing wouldn't be easy, but starting to understand why he had done this, was the first step. He reached out tentatively, touching my hand. I didn't pull away. There was a fragile connection there, the bond of mother and son still present beneath the layers of lies. I could feel his shame, his longing for redemption, and a part of me, tired and wounded, wanted to believe he could find it. "I'll tell you everything," he promised. "I'll answer every question, no matter how hard. You deserve that. You deserve the truth." And in that promise, I felt a spark of hope. Maybe we could navigate this. Maybe the years of lies wouldn't completely destroy us. But I knew it would take more than words. Actions, honesty, and transparency would have to follow. I nodded slowly, letting the silence stretch between us. Outside, the clouds shifted, and a faint beam of sunlight peeked through. It felt symbolic somehow, the first crack of light after a long, stormy night. And in that small, fragile light, I allowed myself to imagine the possibility of reconciliation, even if it was a long, difficult road ahead. The next morning, I woke with a heaviness I couldn't shake. Sleep had come in fits, haunted by images of his hidden accounts, the letters and every lie that had slipped past me. I stared at the ceiling, the sunlight streaming through the blinds feeling almost cruel in its brightness. It was a new day, and yet the betrayal still clung to me like a shadow I couldn't shake. I found him in the kitchen, quietly making coffee as if nothing had happened. The normalcy of it made my chest tighten. How could he act so calm after everything? I wanted to shout, demand answers, demand emotion, but I forced myself to breathe. He was nervous too. I could see it in the way his hands trembled as he poured cream into his cup. That small tremor said more than words ever could. "I want to understand," I said finally, voice soft but firm. "Start from the beginning. When did it all start? Why hide it?" He looked down, eyes fixed on the counter as if the answers were written there. And then, quietly, he began to speak, words tumbling out, shaky at first, then steadier as he confessed years of hidden truths. He spoke of fear, of embarrassment, of feeling unworthy of my help or approval. He admitted to making mistakes, to thinking he could fix problems alone, to believing secrecy was the safest choice. I listened, heart aching, torn between anger and empathy. Each word he spoke peeled back layers of a life I had never known. A life lived in shadows despite being steps away from me. At first, I found it impossible to reconcile the boy I had raised with the man confessing his deceit. But as he continued, I began to see the complexity, the combination of love and fear, pride and shame that had guided his choices. It didn't erase the hurt, but it gave it context, a fragile understanding that this wasn't pure malice. "I thought if I told you," he said, eyes glistening, "you'd be disappointed. I thought I'd lost your trust already, so I figured I'd protect it by keeping it hidden." I nodded slowly, absorbing his words. I could feel the weight of his guilt pressing down on him, heavy enough to bend the strongest backbone. And I realized then that the secret wasn't just about money. It was about his struggle to hold on to my love while hiding his shame. We sat in silence for a long while, the only sound the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the clock. I could feel the tension slowly easing, not gone, but softened by the act of confession. There was a strange relief in hearing it all out loud, in seeing him vulnerably face the consequences of his choices. I wanted to forgive him, I really did, but my heart knew that forgiveness wasn't instant. It had to be earned. "I need time," I admitted, breaking the silence. "Time to process, time to understand fully, and time to decide what happens next. But I want you to be honest, completely honest from now on." He nodded, relief flooding his face. The fear of being discovered had always weighed him down, but now, with truth laid bare, perhaps there was a way forward. I realized that the house felt different now, quieter, but heavier. The secrets no longer hidden, the lies now spoken, and yet a sense of fragile hope lingered. If we were to rebuild trust, it would require effort, patience, and transparency from both of us. And for the first time, I felt that we could try, even if the road ahead was uncertain. He reached across the table and took my hand. It was tentative, almost afraid, but it carried a promise. A promise that the lies would end, that honesty would replace secrecy, and that our bond, though fractured, could still be mended. I squeezed back, unsure if my heart was ready, but willing to take the first step. I thought about the years we had lost to silence, to half-truths, to fear. And yet, even amidst the hurt, I realized something profound. Sometimes the darkest truths can lead to the light if you face them together. My son had hidden his mistakes, but he was willing now to face them, and that willingness mattered more than the money he kept secret. For the first time in days, I allowed myself to breathe fully. The heaviness in my chest didn't vanish, but it became lighter, tempered by the possibility of reconciliation. I could feel the storm slowly lifting, leaving behind the calm after the first violent waves. And in that calm, I found clarity. We would take it one day at a time, one conversation at a time, and perhaps, just perhaps, rebuild what had been broken. But even as hope flickered, I knew the journey was far from over. There would be difficult conversations, moments of doubt, and the lingering ache of betrayal that would not disappear overnight. Yet I was ready to face it all, because love, even when tested by lies, still mattered. And that truth, fragile as it was, became the anchor we both clung to in the days that followed. The following days felt strange, almost surreal. I found myself noticing little things I had taken for granted: the way he brewed his morning coffee, the soft shuffle of his shoes on the kitchen floor, even the nervous glance he threw my way whenever our eyes met. Normally, comforting gestures now carried the weight of our unspoken truths. Everything felt familiar and foreign at the same time. I wanted to hold him, scold him, and question him all at once. But I realized that rushing him wouldn't help. Healing begins with patience. So I let him speak, let him share pieces of his secret life little by little. Sometimes it was about the bank account, sometimes about other small deceptions that seemed trivial on their own, but had been part of a bigger pattern. Each revelation tightened my chest, yet also brought a strange relief. Finally, no more lies. He told me about how he had struggled silently with debts, unexpected bills, and pride that prevented him from asking for help. There were nights he stayed awake, staring at spreadsheets, calculating ways to manage everything without my knowledge. I could hear the strain in his voice, feel the exhaustion he carried silently for years. And yet, it didn't erase the pain of the lies. It just added a layer of understanding. I thought about the countless times I had worried over him, over his future, over the mistakes I thought he might make. How ironic that he had hidden all of this, believing he was protecting me, while in reality, he was protecting himself from judgment. My heart ached at the irony, the layers of misunderstanding that had grown like vines around our relationship. One afternoon, I sat across from him at the kitchen table, documents spread out, coffee cooling in our mugs. The silence between us was heavy but different, no longer the suffocating quiet of shock, but a quiet filled with possibility. "I want to make sure this never happens again," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "Transparency, honesty, from now on? No secrets, no hiding, no fear." He nodded vigorously, relief washing over his face, tears threatening again. He admitted that hiding the money had initially felt necessary, but as the years passed, the weight grew unbearable. Every time I offered help, every time I shared advice, he felt guilty for deceiving me. That guilt had shaped his behavior, his interactions, even his demeanor. I listened, heart heavy but empathetic, realizing that fear, pride, and shame had been the invisible chains binding him. I couldn't help but remember moments from his childhood, the nights I stayed up with him when he was sick, the countless times I comforted him after disappointments, the way he used to cling to my hand when the world felt too big. That child was still in him, the same vulnerable heart trying to navigate a complicated world. And somehow, even amidst betrayal, I still loved him fiercely. The next revelation came unexpectedly. He hesitated, looking away, then whispered, "There's more. Things I didn't think you'd ever understand." I leaned forward, gripping his hands, urging him to continue. He spoke of investments, inheritances, and funds he had quietly managed, fearing that if I knew, I'd worry unnecessarily. The secrecy had started small, with good intentions, but had spiraled into a web he couldn't escape. As I listened, my mind went through a whirlwind of emotions: anger, sorrow, relief, hope. I realized that understanding his motives didn't erase the betrayal, but it painted it in a more human light. He had made mistakes, yes, but he had also carried the burden of secrecy like a shadow over his life, silently trying to protect both of us. I asked questions, many questions, some simple, some painful. Why did he never confide in me? How did he justify the lies to himself? Could he have trusted me sooner? Each answer revealed layers I had never anticipated: regret, fear, and a desperate longing for my approval. And I realized that this conversation, painful as it was, could be a turning point. We talked for hours, digging into past events, examining choices, and slowly, the tension began to ease. He apologized not just for the money, but for the fear he caused, the trust he broke, the lies that had clouded our relationship. His words were simple, sincere, yet heavy with emotion. And though I couldn't forget, I could start to forgive, because acknowledging mistakes is the first step toward repair. That evening, I reflected on our conversation. I realized that love isn't simple, it isn't blind, and it isn't always fair. It's messy, complicated, and sometimes intertwined with mistakes and missteps. And yet, it persists. I thought about how many families hide truths, how many children fear telling their parents the whole story, how many relationships carry hidden burdens. Our experience was painful, but it was also a reminder of the resilience of connection. The next few days were filled with small gestures of reconciliation. He began to involve me in financial decisions he had previously kept secret. We reviewed accounts together, made plans, and began a new level of honesty I hadn't expected. Every small step felt monumental. I could feel the weight of fear and deception lifting, replaced by tentative trust and cautious hope. I noticed changes in him too. His shoulders seemed less burdened, his smiles more genuine, his laughter a little freer. And I realized that healing works both ways. By forgiving, by listening, by allowing space for growth, we could rebuild something that felt irreparably broken. The money wasn't the issue anymore. It was the trust, the bond, the years lost in silence. And now, slowly, we were reclaiming them. At night, I would lie awake thinking about what had happened, wondering how we would navigate the future. But instead of dread, there was a flicker of hope. A mother's love is enduring even when tested by deception, and a son's courage to confess, even after years of hiding, can spark a beginning where despair once lived. I realized that the journey of understanding and forgiveness had just begun, and I was ready to walk it, hand in hand with the child I had raised and the man he had become. A week passed and things slowly began to feel normal again, but in a fragile, cautious way. He would come into the kitchen in the mornings, offer me a coffee, and we'd sit together talking about life, work, and mundane things that suddenly felt precious. Each moment was tinged with relief, but also a quiet tension, a reminder that the trust we once had was still mending, fragile as glass. One afternoon, I found him sitting in the study, staring at a pile of old receipts and letters I hadn't seen before. His brow was furrowed, eyes clouded with worry and thoughtfulness. I walked over, gently placing a hand on his shoulder. "Are you okay?" I asked softly. He looked up, a small, tired smile forming. "I'm trying to fix things," he admitted. "I want you to see everything, understand everything, so there's nothing left hidden." It struck me then how much effort he was putting in, not just to correct his past mistakes, but to regain my trust. It was humbling and at the same time heartbreaking. How heavy must that burden have been for him, carrying secrets for so many years, fearing judgment, fearing disappointment, fearing losing me. I realized forgiveness wouldn't be instant, but maybe, just maybe, healing had begun. We spent hours that afternoon going through every document, every statement, every letter he had tucked away. He explained each decision, each deposit, each move he had made. And as I listened, I could feel the anger softening, not disappearing but giving way to understanding. I realized that the man before me was flawed, yes, but he was also courageous. It takes courage to confess years of lies, to face the person you love most, and to ask for forgiveness. At one point, he paused, eyes downcast, and whispered, "I don't want to lose you. Mom, I've realized how much I needed your guidance all along. I thought I could manage everything, but I see now that I was wrong." My heart ached at his words, the vulnerability in his voice stripping away layers of pride, fear, and shame. I could see the boy I had raised still shining beneath the man he had become. I reached out and took his hand, squeezing gently. We won't lose each other, I said, voice trembling. But you need to promise me no more secrets. Honesty always, even when it's hard, even when it's uncomfortable. That's the only way we move forward. He nodded, a tear escaping down his cheek. I promise, he said, voice barely audible but sincere. As the days turned into weeks, small gestures became our bridge. He would check in with me about finances, share updates about work, and even seek advice for decisions he might have once handled alone. Slowly, the invisible wall between us began to crumble, and I realized that trust isn't rebuilt overnight. It's earned moment by moment, through consistent honesty and openness. Yet, even amidst progress, shadows lingered. I still found myself questioning small things, double-checking statements, replaying past conversations in my head. It was natural, I reminded myself, for the hurt to linger. But I also knew that clinging to suspicion would only harm the fragile bond we were trying to rebuild. The key was balance, awareness without obsession, forgiveness without denial. One evening, as we sat together reviewing old letters, he hesitated, then said, "Mom, there's something else I need to show you. Something I didn't understand myself until recently." My curiosity piqued, my heart tightening. He handed me a small envelope sealed and worn from time. "It's my plan for the money, how I intended to use it and why I kept it hidden." I opened it slowly, carefully unfolding the pages. Inside were calculations, plans, notes about debts, savings goals, and even future investments he had intended for emergencies. Every line revealed meticulous thought, careful planning, and a fear of letting me down. I felt a mixture of relief and sorrow, relief that he hadn't wasted the money, and sorrow for the years of fear and secrecy that had kept us apart. He watched me carefully, eyes searching mine for judgment or anger. But instead, I felt a swell of understanding, tempered with love. "I see now," I said softly. "You weren't trying to deceive out of greed. You were scared, trying to protect me and yourself. That doesn't excuse hiding it, but I understand your heart." He exhaled slowly, a mix of relief and tentative hope washing over his face. We spent the rest of the evening talking, not just about money, but about everything we had missed. Birthdays, small achievements, moments of laughter and sorrow that we hadn't shared fully because of the unspoken tension. And I realized that honesty wasn't just about confessing mistakes. It was about reconnecting, rebuilding intimacy, and letting each other back into our lives fully. As night fell, I felt a quiet sense of peace. The journey wasn't over, and the trust wasn't fully restored, but we had taken the first real steps. I thought about how fragile relationships can be, how easily fear and pride can create chasms between people we love. And I felt grateful for the chance to rebuild, for the courage he had shown, and for the bond that, though tested, had survived. And in that moment, I made a silent promise to myself. I would nurture this fragile trust, guard it, and allow it to grow. I would remind him and myself that honesty is never easy, but it is always worth it. And slowly, carefully, we would rebuild a relationship stronger than the mistakes that had threatened to destroy it. A few days later, I noticed a shift in him. The way he carried himself, the subtle confidence returning to his step, and the openness in his eyes. It was like he was shedding the weight of years of secrecy. And yet, even as he grew lighter, I felt the lingering shadows of betrayal in my own chest. Trust is not rebuilt overnight, and though progress was evident, I knew we were still navigating delicate terrain. One afternoon, he invited me into his study again. The sunlight filtered through the blinds, creating stripes of light and shadow across the room, like the emotions we were still walking through, part light, part darkness. He held a folder in his hands, looking nervous but determined. "Mom," he began softly, "there's more I need to show you. Things I've been too scared to explain before." I nodded, heart tight but ready. I realized that to truly move forward, I had to face everything. The good, the bad, the messy, and the hidden. He opened the folder, revealing letters, bank statements, and even personal notes he had written over the years. Each one told a story of fear, secrecy, and desperate attempts to handle life without burdening me. As I read through the documents, my chest ached. It wasn't just about the money. This was a window into his mind, his struggles, his loneliness. The meticulous planning, the hidden savings, the careful records, it all pointed to a young man overwhelmed by responsibility, ashamed of his perceived failures, and terrified of disappointing the one person whose opinion mattered most: me. He watched me closely, waiting for a reaction, for a sign that I could understand. I swallowed hard, feeling tears prick the corners of my eyes. "I can see now," I said softly, "how much pressure you were under. How scared you felt. I understand why you did it. But it still hurts, son. It hurts to realize you felt you had to hide everything from me." He nodded, shame and relief mingling on his face. "I know," he whispered. "I didn't mean to hurt you, I didn't know how to do it differently. I thought I was protecting you, but I see now I was only protecting myself." The honesty in his voice cut through the lingering tension in the room. It was raw, vulnerable, and real. We sat together in silence for a while, the hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the clock filling the space between us. For the first time, it felt like we were truly connecting, not just mother and son, but two people navigating the aftermath of secrets, betrayal, and long-held fears. And in that silence, I could feel a small, fragile thread of trust beginning to mend. I reached out and took his hand, holding it firmly but gently. "We'll get through this," I said, my voice steady. "It won't be easy and it won't be quick, but we'll take it one step at a time. I want to understand you fully. I want honesty, always, no matter how hard it is." He squeezed my hand, a silent promise of commitment and change. That night, I reflected on everything that had happened, the lies, the fear, the secrets, the revelations, and I realized that this wasn't just a story of betrayal. It was a story of growth, courage, and the resilience of love. He had made mistakes, yes, but he had also shown the bravery to face them, to confess, and to seek a way forward. Over the next few weeks, we continued to work through the past. Conversations that once would have been uncomfortable became opportunities for connection. He shared more about his struggles, and I listened, offering guidance without judgment. Slowly, the invisible wall between us began to crumble, replaced by understanding, patience, and cautious hope. I also noticed small changes in myself. I felt less guarded, less fearful of being hurt again. I realized that forgiveness is not about forgetting. It's about choosing to move forward, to rebuild, and to believe in the possibility of change. And for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to believe that our bond, though tested, could become even stronger than it was before. One evening, as we sat together watching the sunset, he spoke softly, almost to himself. "Mom, I don't want to live with secrets ever again. I want us to be honest, completely, even if it's hard." I nodded, heart full. "Me too, son. Me too." And in that simple exchange, I felt the weight of the past begin to lift, replaced by a fragile but growing trust. The journey was far from over. But for the first time since discovering the hidden bank account, I felt a sense of peace. A sense that we could navigate the challenges ahead, together, with honesty, patience, and love. The mistakes of the past no longer had to define us. Instead, they could be the lessons that shaped the future. A future where trust, once broken, could be rebuilt stronger than before. And as I watched him smile, tentative but genuine, I knew that this was just the beginning. A beginning filled with hope, understanding, and the courage to face the truth, no matter how uncomfortable. It was a new chapter for both of us, one where honesty became our anchor and love our guiding light. Weeks passed, and our mornings together became a ritual. Coffee, quiet conversation, and shared laughter that had been absent for far too long. I noticed how he had started opening up about small things, work frustrations, friendships, even childhood memories he hadn't mentioned before. Each detail felt like a bridge, slowly reconnecting us, brick by brick, across the chasm of years of secrecy. One afternoon, he brought up something I hadn't expected, a letter he had written years ago but never sent. His hands trembled slightly as he handed it to me. "I wrote this to you after my first big mistake," he said quietly. "I never had the courage to give it to you. Until now." I unfolded the paper, the familiar handwriting carrying the weight of both time and unspoken fear. The letter spoke of his shame, his regret, and his desire to be the son I had raised him to be. It confessed every hidden choice, every secret decision, and every sleepless night he had endured, worrying about my disappointment. My chest tightened as I read, anger mingled with sorrow, and yet beneath it all there was love. Deep, desperate love that had never left him, even when he had hidden the truth. Tears welled up, and I reached across the table, taking his hand in mine. "You were scared," I whispered. "But you loved me enough to try. That matters, son. That matters more than anything else." He exhaled slowly, a mixture of relief and vulnerability flooding his face. The tension that had gripped both of us seemed to ease slightly, though the road to full trust was still ahead. Over the next few days, we worked together to untangle the remaining threads of secrecy. He showed me old transactions, explained investments, and even admitted small mistakes he hadn't shared before. Each revelation was difficult, yet each also felt like a release, another layer of honesty replacing years of fear and concealment. I realized that healing is messy and slow, but the willingness to face it honestly creates a foundation stronger than any facade could ever offer. One evening, we found ourselves sitting on the back porch, the sunset painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. The warmth of the evening was comforting, but the conversation we had was far from easy. "Mom," he said softly, "I know I've made mistakes and I can't erase them, but I want you to see the real me, the son I've always wanted to be, the one I hid behind fear and pride." I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw a mixture of remorse, hope, and determination in his eyes. It was raw and unfiltered. "I see you, son," I said, my voice catching slightly. "I see the mistakes, yes, but I also see the courage it takes to admit them. And I see the love that never went away, even when things got messy." His eyes glistened, and I felt a wave of relief that some part of our bond had survived the storm. The next day, we decided to organize all the financial records together. It felt like more than bookkeeping, it was symbolic. Each document, each account, each ledger was a reminder of the trust we were rebuilding, piece by piece. And as we worked, we laughed, shared stories, and even joked about small mistakes he had made along the way. For the first time in years, our relationship felt balanced, honest, open, and real. But amidst the progress, I noticed subtle reminders of the past. Every now and then, my mind would drift to the days before the secret was revealed, to the moments of doubt, fear, and betrayal. And each time I reminded myself that acknowledgement is part of healing. To ignore the past would be to pretend nothing had happened. To face it, learn from it, and move forward. That is how trust survives. That night, as I lay in bed reflecting, I felt a mix of exhaustion and gratitude. Exhaustion from confronting years of hidden truths, and gratitude for the chance to rebuild what had almost been lost. I realized that love doesn't vanish when mistakes are made. It adapts, grows, and sometimes becomes stronger when honesty and courage finally break through. A few days later, he came to me with a small gift, a photo album filled with pictures from his childhood, ones he had kept hidden while he focused on the chaos of adult responsibilities. "I wanted to remind us," he said softly, "where we started and how much we've been through together." Flipping through the pages, I felt warmth flood my heart. The memories were a testament to the enduring bond beneath the layers of fear and secrecy. In that moment, I knew the journey wasn't over, but it had taken a meaningful turn. We had faced betrayal, confronted mistakes, and chosen honesty over fear. And for the first time in a long time, I felt that our relationship could heal, not perfectly, not instantly, but with patience, love, and mutual understanding. The days that followed felt like walking on a tightrope. Each moment carried both hope and fragility. Our mornings were still filled with coffee and conversation, but now they were deeper. He shared his fears. I shared my worries, and we slowly began to rebuild a rhythm that had been lost to secrets. The smallest gestures, like a smile or a shared joke, now felt monumental. One afternoon, he surprised me by clearing the cluttered study. Boxes of old letters, envelopes, and forgotten documents were neatly organized. "I want you to see everything," he said softly. His hands trembled slightly as he handed me each folder. I could feel the weight of years pressing down on both of us. These weren't just papers. They were symbols of trust betrayed and, now cautiously being restored. As I sifted through the letters, I noticed notes tucked in corners, reminders he had left himself about promises, goals, and regrets. Each one revealed the burden he had carried silently, the fear of disappointing me, and the careful planning he had done to protect both himself and our family. My chest ached, not from anger, but from the complexity of emotions swirling inside me: love, sorrow, empathy, and the lingering pain of deception. He watched me carefully, eyes searching mine for a sign that I could understand, that I could forgive. I nodded slowly, trying to convey both my hurt and my desire to believe in him again. "I can see your heart," I said softly. "I understand your fear, and I know you didn't mean to hurt me. But the lies, they still hurt. I can't pretend they didn't happen." He exhaled, relief and sorrow mixing on his face. It was a moment of honesty, one that felt heavy and light at the same time. Over the next few days, we worked together to reconcile the accounts, going line by line, transaction by transaction. At times it was tedious. At times emotions ran high. But through it all, I could see him opening up, not just about money, but about life, regrets, and the mistakes he had made along the way. And I realized that this process, painful as it was also a form of healing. One evening, he sat beside me on the porch, the sunset painting the sky in shades of gold and purple. "Mom," he said quietly, "I've realized that hiding everything didn't protect us. It only made things worse. I want to do things differently now." I nodded, my throat tight. "I want that too, son. I want honesty, always. No matter how hard it is, no matter how uncomfortable it gets. That's the only way we move forward." We talked long into the night, sharing stories from the past, dreams for the future, and reflections on the mistakes that had brought us here. I could feel the bond between us strengthening, fragile but real. For the first time in years, it felt like we were truly seeing each other. Not just the mother and son, but the humans beneath the roles we played, flawed and trying but full of love. Then, one afternoon, he handed me another envelope, smaller this time. "I wrote this last year," he said softly. "I didn't have the courage to give it to you, but I think now is the right time." I opened it carefully, the paper worn and folded with care. Inside was a letter, a confession not just of secrets, but of feelings: fear, regret, love, and longing for approval. As I read, tears streamed down my face. Each word was raw and vulnerable, and yet filled with hope. I looked up at him, unable to speak at first. "I see you, son," I whispered finally. "I see your mistakes, yes, but I also see the courage it took to admit them. And I see the love that never left you, even when things got messy." He reached for my hand, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt the weight of years lift. Even if only slightly, the following days were a mix of normalcy and reflection. He began involving me in decisions he had previously kept secret, asking for advice and sharing his plans openly. And I, in turn, tried to let go of lingering doubts, reminding myself that healing is not linear. It is messy, slow, and requires patience. Each honest conversation felt like a step forward. Each small gesture of transparency a brick in rebuilding the foundation of trust. One evening, as we prepared dinner together, I noticed how relaxed he seemed, less burdened, more present. And I realized that honesty doesn't just heal relationships. It heals the soul. The man before me was still flawed, still human, but he was trying. And in that trying, I saw hope. Hope that love, even when tested by lies, could survive. Hope that trust, once broken, could be rebuilt. Later that night, as I lay in bed, I thought about the journey we had taken, the betrayal, the fear, the confessions, the healing. And I understood something profound. Mistakes do not define us. How we face them, how we acknowledge them, and how we choose to rebuild defines us. My son had made mistakes, yes, but he had also chosen to confront them, to show courage, and to seek reconciliation. I drifted to sleep with a sense of cautious peace. The road ahead would still have challenges, moments of doubt and lingering pain, but there was also light born from honesty, vulnerability, and a willingness to rebuild. And I knew that no matter what happened next, we had taken the hardest step, choosing truth over secrecy and love over fear. The weeks turned into months, and the fragile trust between us began to grow stronger. We had shared so many late-night talks, pored over documents, and confessed truths that had long been hidden. The fear and tension that once filled our home gradually gave way to quiet laughter, gentle smiles, and moments of genuine connection. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and that mattered more than anything. One evening, we sat together in the living room, sipping tea and watching the sun dip below the horizon. He reached over and touched my hand, a simple gesture filled with meaning. "Mom," he said softly, "I feel lighter now. I feel like I can finally be myself, without hiding, without fear." I smiled, squeezing his hand. "And I feel like I can finally trust you again, son." It's a process, but we're getting there. I realized then that forgiveness is not about forgetting. It's about choosing to move forward, even when the hurt is still present. It's about allowing someone the chance to show they've changed, to rebuild, to prove that love and honesty can survive even the darkest mistakes. And in that moment, I felt the deep, unshakable truth of our bond. Tested, but unbroken. He shared stories of his struggles, some funny, some painful, some revealing how much he had learned about himself. I listened, heart full, realizing that he had grown in ways I had never imagined. The hidden bank account had been a symbol of fear and secrecy, but it had also been the turning point, a wake-up call that forced both of us to confront the truths we had avoided. There were still moments of tension, moments when old doubts crept in, and moments when I questioned if the trust we were rebuilding would last. But each time we chose honesty, communication, and understanding. Slowly, the walls that secrecy had built around our hearts began to crumble, replaced by a foundation stronger than before. Transparency, empathy, and mutual respect. One afternoon, he surprised me with a gesture I never expected. He had prepared a small binder, a timeline of our financial matters, letters, and notes, all organized neatly. "I want you to see everything," he said, "so there's never any doubt again." I flipped through the pages, heart swelling with emotion. This was more than organization. It was accountability, love, and a tangible promise that secrecy had no place between us anymore. As I looked at him, I saw the man he had become, not perfect, not flawless, but brave, honest, and willing to confront the consequences of his actions. And I felt a profound sense of pride mixed with relief. The son I had raised had learned, grown, and faced his mistakes with courage. And in doing so, he had given me the gift of reconciliation, trust, and renewed love. That night, I reflected on our journey, the betrayal, the hidden truths, the confessions, and the healing. I understood something powerful. The pain of the past doesn't have to define the future. Mistakes can teach lessons, lies can lead to truths, and forgiveness can restore what fear and secrecy once threatened to destroy. I felt a sense of closure, not because the past was erased, but because we had faced it together. In the weeks that followed, life took on a quieter, more meaningful rhythm. We laughed more, spoke more openly, and even shared small, ordinary moments that felt extraordinary after so much tension. The bond between mother and son, tested by deception and strengthened by honesty, began to shine in ways I hadn't dared to imagine. One morning, as I watched him leave for work, I felt a surge of gratitude. Not just for the reconciliation, but for the lessons we had learned together, the courage to speak the truth, the strength to face mistakes, and the resilience of love that never truly dies. Our relationship had been tested in the harshest ways, yet it survived, stronger and more meaningful than before. I realized that life isn't about avoiding mistakes or hiding from consequences. It's about facing them, learning from them, and choosing love over fear. And in that truth, I found peace. My son had lied, hidden, and carried secrets, but he had also shown growth, courage, and the willingness to make amends. And that made all the difference. As night fell, I sat by the window looking at the stars and felt a quiet joy. The journey had been painful, but it had led us here, to understanding, reconciliation, and a love that was real, honest, and unshakable. The past could not be undone, but the present and future were ours to shape. And together, we would continue, stronger and closer than ever. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe for more. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love reading your thoughts.